This is not a bias, this is a fact, but I went to the best primary school there is, Carmen Rene Memorial School. And you can shake your head all you want. My business. Best school.
Edited out.
Richard Martyr is a true child of the island. Despite currently living in Canada, his St. Lucian upbringing, filled with strong family influences, have been central to who he is right now. There were many opportunities for his life to turn out quite differently, but as life may have it, he can humbly look back on each part and how it has influenced where he is right now. And so, thank you for sharing with us today, Richard.
I guess I'll start with my name for those who don't know, Richard Martyr. Me, I'm an old soul in terms of like from a cultural background. I am Canadian now, but I am very much St. Lucian in my heart and my core. That's not going to go away, even with what I've been here in Canada going on, yeah, almost 18 years now, and I still have my accent. So a little watered down, but it's still there. My parents studied at well, what is now Mona campus, like the Technical Institute. It was not what was formerly known as CAST back in the day. Mom was a quantity surveyor by trade, and my dad was at the time a land surveyor by trade. So they were both into surveying. That's essentially how they met at the technical school there. At some fateful time in the 1970s or early 1980s, they met up, and in 1983 they had me. We lived together as a family for a little bit, and then I mean, when they separated, when I was, can't remember, around 2 or 3, they separated, and then so I lived with my mom primarily, but my dad was still very active in my life and still is up to this point. My I was raised primarily by my grandmother because my mom was for a few years she was studying, so I ended up living living with my grandmother. She raised me and with all my cousins. So being my mom's only child, I was a little bit of a spoiled brat. So my grandmother provided that balance. So she kept me in check. Every time I thought I was the center of the universe, she kind of very quickly reminded me that I wasn't. That's not to say that she didn't love me. By all means, I love that. It was very clear that I was one of her favorites, if not her favorite. But she also made me realize that there are bigger things. It's not just me, right? She had her own household to manage, right? She had her own kids because I have an uncle that's relatively close in age to me. He's like about 7 years older than me, right? I don't remember much of living with my mom and dad together. I do my earliest memories were living with my mom, my grandma, and my uncles and aunts. And I grew up well. I first lived in at Corinth, then Marisil, before my mom built a house up in Ti Mourne, and that's where I spent most of my childhood. And most of my up until I was like 20 really. I spent most of my life up in Ti Mourne with a couple of short stints at an aunt and an uncle here and there. Ti Mourne back in the day was a very close knit community. Pretty much, you're either related to somebody, to the anyone you saw, or you were like you knew that person from the time you were year high, right? So very close knit community. Few elements of crime here and there, but for the most part, people were like good, decent people. Those were the days where you could leave your kids on the road. They would go play. Like we would go play, and then once the sun set, we knew that we had to come home. That was our alarm clock. We didn't have curfews per se, but we knew that once it got dark, find yourself home, right? And like I said, again, everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody's business, right? Which I guess comes with living in a small community. And you know what? It was just it was my childhood was just a lot of fun. Like honestly, I remember just having a lot of like going adventures, just going down in the bush with my cousins and my uncles. Going digging yams, going and pick mangoes, that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, it was. I love my childhood. I wouldn't change a thing about it, honestly.
What is a fun childhood memory that stands out to you even now?
Hmm. A fun childhood memory would be my ninth birthday, which is actually the only birthday party I've ever had. It was it was one of those days where, you know what, I had all my cousins, like all my favorite people in the world at the time were there. And it was my first birthday after my mom had passed, because my mom passed when I was 8. So I think a lot of effort went into making sure that it was a good birthday, and it was. I got presents. I had, like I said, my family was all there. I had new clothes, new shoes, and it was nice. And to this day, I still remember it.
Personality-wise, how would others have described you as a kid?
As a child, I was definitely a talkative, smart, a little bit self-centered, a little spoiled up until up. No, actually, no, a little spoiled period. But it was tempered a lot when my mom passed, and then I had to live with my grandmother because, again, my grandmother had her own household to run, and I was another person to add to that. And don't think it's not okay that it wasn't like for a lack of love or affection, because I got a lot of that, right? But it wasn't just me anymore. Whereas with my mom, it was just I was my mom's only child, so I didn't have to share the affection. But now I have my uncles who are relatively close in age to me. I have all my other cousins that live within like a stone's throw, literally, right? And some that lived with us in the house as well. But like I said, from 8 onward, I was forced to grow up a little bit quicker than normal, because you lose a parent that young. There are lots of implications, right? That said, though, I did gain a hell of a lot of mother figures, right? So yeah, between my grandmother, I have 2 aunts on my mother's side, and I have one on my father's side. They became de facto mothers. I had 2 grandmothers at the time. They stepped in. I had my godmother who, oh, I love that. Oh yeah, I had my godmother who is awesome. So I did not lack for mother figures at all, right? So on the one hand, I may have lost the one, but on the other, I gained quite a bit.
How did your mom pass?
My mom passed from a condition called pulmonary edema. It's essentially a circulatory condition. So, long story short, her heart wasn't pumping as efficiently, and so she ended up getting swelling of a bunch of organs, and eventually it led to organ failure, and she passed. And she was studying at the time in Scotland, so she was there by herself, poor thing. Um, and um, and it was relatively sudden too. Yeah, it was relatively quick. We got the call December 3rd. It was in the afternoon. My dad comes and gets me. Didn't really resonate with me up until I saw her the day of her funeral, December 12th. And I remember looking into a coffin, and that's when it hit, right? There's really not there's it was final then, because up until then, there's still that childish hope that, hey, some miracle's gonna happen. I mean, it happened with Jesus. Why can't it happen with her, right? She was a good person. That's when it really sunk in that, hey, she's gone. There's not much you can do. And I was young enough to process it and not be totally scarred about it 30 odd years later. So I did mature a lot faster than the people around me. I still had a good childhood. I was still able to be a child, and still able, and juxtaposing that with having a lot of experiences that other kids didn't get to have, because, again, because of that level of maturity, because of the intelligence that I had at a young age. So I was driving when I was 10. My uncles stepped in a lot, because, like, I didn't live with my dad, and that's not he was there, don't get me wrong. I saw him pretty much every day, but I didn't live with him. So my uncles were there. They taught me how to drive. The first time I drove a car on my own was my uncle Steve. It was on my 12th birthday. I drove his car on my own. So I was somewhat blessed in that sense, where I got to do and experience quite a few more things that the average child wouldn't be able to, right? Just because I lived in that setting. So I am eternally grateful for that, right? So, and from them, again, I learned, they were the ultimate quote unquote feminists, in the sense that They believed there was no such thing as, washing clothes is a woman's thing. No, you wash your own clothes. And they did it. My uncles would be in front of their basin of clothes. So, and in terms of cooking, they taught me how to cook. They taught me how to take care of a house, in addition to going in the garden and doing the manual labor that's associated with quote unquote manhood. There was definitely not a mindset of, okay, this is, this is your task because, you're a woman or you're a man. And like everybody did everything. My aunts would be putting up shelves and going in garden just as much as any man. I didn't have a sibling up until 5 years, when I was 5 years old. And even then it wasn't with my mom. My dad had my sister. My sister she's pretty awesome. Her mom actually was a great person who incidentally also passed away, which is one of those interesting commonalities that me and her have. Like I said, we didn't grow up together, but I know that if there's something that I need or she needs, we know where to find each other.
Tell me more about what you did for fun. I know you hinted at it just a bit, but what did a regular day look like?
Well, after we did our chores, because we had either to make our beds or to clean the kitchen or rake the leaves outside. Once you did that, you were just out in the savannah, so to speak. Go out and climb trees, go look for fruits, go, play Power Rangers in almond trees, that kind of stuff, right? Fun was just, like I said, being outside, just doing things, bathing in the rain, going down in the bush, playing catchers and and Chinese skip and skipping and bullseye. Like those are my child. That was my childhood. Those are the games that we played. Like I mean, I had toys. I had a game console, but my grandmother is not one of those that ever allowed you to just sit in front of a screen all day. Like at some point, yeah, get your butt outside. And on Saturdays, because I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, we would go to church in Granivier, and that we would walk to church. Actually, there was a shortcut up the hill behind my house. We would take that and walk all the way up to Des Gazons, where we had a small church there at the time. I went to Carmen and Rene Memorial School for that's the infant and primary school. Then from there, I went to St. Mary's College, and then from there, I went to Sir Arthur Lewis for 2 years. Sir Arthur Lewis is where I met my now wife, right? And that was where I found out I was going to be a father pretty damn young. That experience was one where definitely not planned, in the sense that, you know what, we had gone on a couple of dates, and then, you know, as things progress when you're young and you're passionate, we had our moment. Moment turned into Natalia, my daughter. And it was one of those decisions where, luckily, again, because of my formative years, I grew up knowing that, hey, the consequences of having sex is kids may happen. I grew up with that. I knew that. And I also grew up knowing that as a responsible adult, as a man, you step up and you take care of your responsibilities. So it was one of those situations where, all right, this is where we're at. Child ain't going nowhere, so let's make the best of it. And luckily enough, we're in 2022. It'll be 21 years in December that we're together, and we'll be 12 years married. So it was one of those stories that could have gone bad, but it turned out pretty decent.
What do you do for work now, and how did you get into this industry?
Okay, so I work right now as a distribution supervisor for a ready-mix company, for a concrete company. How did I get there was, you know what? When my first job in Canada was for a small engineering geosynthetics company, but and I loved it. And if I were a single man, I would probably still be there. But it did require a lot of travel, so I was spending a lot of time away from home. So what the primary reason for working at the company that I am now was I got to come home every day.
So looking back at your life, what are you most proud of?
I am most proud of the fact of my family, really. The fact that my wife and I, we we did barely knew each other when we met, and 20 odd years in, we're still going, still discovering things about each other, yet still there, um, still battling together. The fact that my kids, in spite of it, we still managed to raise three pretty decent kids. Um, and yeah, that's my that's my thing. The fact that we've gotten quite a few hard knocks over the last few years. I mean, I've from a personal level, I've had to grow up without a mom for a while, and there's a lot of subconscious trauma that's associated with that you don't really think about. And I was lucky that I had a lot of people around me to help go through that. But that doesn't mean that it didn't have an impact, because it did. So in spite of that, I was still able to not hold any bitterness or resentment or jealousy towards other people for having those kinds of relationships with their parents or their mother. Everything that you do in your life, it adds up to the person that you are now. So if I changed one thing, then maybe I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And I kind of like the person that I am today. I would use the catalog of my life as a teaching moment to my kids, and for anybody who'd like to listen. Yeah, this is what I did well. This is what I could have done differently. Learn from it, but I wouldn't change a thing.